Hello everyone and welcome in this new lecture. In the previous lecture, we have looked how rotary switches can be used in order to turn on and off signals inside the PLC. Now let's assume we have these types of push buttons. Now as you know, these push buttons, once you press it, it will latch and it will conduct power. However, once you release it, it will cut the power. But what we saw earlier with rotary switches, we were constantly giving power to the input of the PLC. Hence, it was taking this power from the input and activating some coil in our program. But right now, what's gonna happen is that we will press, it will conduct power to the coil, but we will release and it will cut the power going to the coil. So how can we keep this coil latching with these types of push buttons? Now remember, what we used to do with these types of push buttons, we used to take an NO from our contactor and we used to give power through this NO in order to keep the coil latched. So how can we do a similar scenario in our PLC? So take a look right here. Here. Let's press simulation. We have our start push button and we have our motor. Remember here that we have a push button that does not latch unless we keep pressing it. So let's do this scenario. I have latched, Control F7. Now I'm pressing the button. Let's say I have released it. And my coil got delatched. So how can we turn our motor on in this scenario? Here's what we need to do. Let's log out. And I'm going to change this coil to another type of coil, which is a set coil. Let's delete this one. Click on the rectangle right here. Click on Insert Set Coil right here. And it's the same as the coil, but there is an S letter inside of it. Let's give it the same name, motor. And now let's see what's gonna happen. We'll click on Login. Login with download, okay. Click on Start. Okay. Now let's press this push button. True, Control F7, it latched. Let's say I'm still holding the push button. Now let me release the push button. Double click, turn it to false. And what do we see here? The motor is still latching, it's still blue. And the value in the variable is also still blue. So what happened here? This is a set type of coil. Once you give it a signal, it's going to set that variable to 1 and it won't release it. Even if you cut the power, this variable will always be on. Now you might think, okay, how can we turn off this motor? We need to do the following in order to do that. Let's log out and let me insert a second line here. Right click, press Insert Network. And we have a new programming line. Now let me take another contact and I will call it my stop contact. So it's like my stop button. Now let's insert a new type of coil, which is a reset coil. Click on this small rectangle, Click on the reset coil, and here it is. Now we will also name it motor. So now we have a set and a reset. If we press start, it will set. If we press stop, it will reset this coil. Let's simulate it. Log in with download, OK, start, and let's try it. Start, true, Control F7, release the push button, Control F7, and the motor is still latching. Now let's press the stop push button. Double click, true, Control F7, and it delatched. Let's release the stop button, and here we go. As you can see now, we can use those push buttons in order to turn on and off a motor using these set coils. Now we might face some problem with this configuration. Let's see why. Assume that I have turned on my motor or my coil, and let me release. It got set. Now let me press the stop button. Now let's assume that this stop button, the real hardware stop button, the contacts got stuck, let's say, and you didn't notice that. Now you will try to turn on your motor again. You press the start push button, Control F7, and as you can see, the motor did not turn on. Why? Because in this scenario, we are pressing the start push button, which is setting the motor, and we are pressing the stop push button, which is resetting this motor coil. This contradiction is going to make the motor confused whether it should turn on or off. So how can we solve this problem? Well, we can solve it with edge detection based contacts. Let's see what is that. Log out. Now let's right click on this start push button, and let's choose edge detection. Let's do the same thing for the stop button. Right click, edge detection. Now we have a contact with a P letter inside it. These type of contacts will only conduct power if your signal is going from 0 to 1. Once your signal goes from 0 to 1, it will conduct power for a few milliseconds and it will disconnect automatically. Let's see how does this work. Let me simulate. Log in with download. Click on play. Let's see. I have pressed my push button. My motor is on, but notice this line is black. It's not blue. There is no more power going. This P is going to give us a small signal for only few milliseconds. Now let me release this push button. Let me press the stop push button right now. Through Control F7, and it got reset. Now let's say this push button got stuck. Let's not release it. Let's press the start push button right now. And as you can see, even though the stop button is still on, the start signal started here. Contact, thanks to this P-type contact. Now there is another type of contact, which is an N-type. Let's see how the N-type contact works. Now this is my start push button. I will right click on it and press edge detection again. I will get an N letter right here. For the stop push button, now it's an N. Now the difference between P and N is the following. The P, as we mentioned, if the signal is 0 and turned into 1, it will give us a pulse for a few milliseconds. The N is the opposite. If your signal is on and you turn it off, then you will give a pulse for a few milliseconds. So it depends whether it's on first or off first. Let's simulate this. Click on Start, Log in with download, press OK. Start, and here we go. Now look, I'm going to press my start push button. Double click, true. See, the coil didn't latch because the N is waiting for this signal to go from on to off in order to give a pulse. Now let me release this start push button, and as you can see now my motor got latched because it was on then off. The same thing for this stop push button right now. If I double click here and let's say I have pressed my push button, Control F7, see, well, we still didn't turn off our coil right here. What we need to do is release the stop push button, double click, false, Control F7, and now we turned off our coil.